Hello and welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man that's going to help me talk about this vile bag of garbage. It's Haikim Robinson.
Hey everybody.
Hey, welcome
How's
back.
it going? Yes, it's good to be back. Good to talk some more films, some good films.
We've done Mad Max Fury Road, Hard Boiled, the Blade movies. You've got some good movies tackled
Yeah,
on
man,
here.
we got to keep it going. Hopefully this one fits into the bag of previous good films you just mentioned.
Yeah, we got a fun series coming up. We have this Maniac and
Miss 45. And then I said, we should think about the other ones that fit in there, like maybe a Death Wish, but it's probably a Death Wish 2 opposed to Death Wish 1. But
yeah, not the good one. Go to
nah, not
like go to 4 when it's just absolute depravity.
yeah. Or Maniac Cop should
Oh,
fit kind of. There you
yes.
go. Yes. The Gritty series. The
The,
Gritty
I
series.
love
Yes,
it.
sir.
This started because I had an episode. I recorded an episode with Johnny Num about Bad Lieutenant. I let you borrow Bad Lieutenant. You watch Bad Lieutenant. Then we started talking about. You asked me about Miss 45. I said I never watched Miss 45. Then we got into a good discussion about kind of late 70s, early 80s exploitation movies, and we're like, let's do a gritty series. Let's cover these gritty movies. And you picked. We're starting off with a bang because you picked the granddaddy of all, like one of the, most buzzed about exploitation films, right? I mean, there's early 40s you had Freaks, which was huge. That's like a really excellent a great example of exploitation cinema. What Mom and Dad, that movie that everyone went to go watch about the parents and like live childbirth, but no, this is fun. And the more I research exploitation cinema, when film was like going, it was kind of a wild wild west, Hakeem. Like there was no ruling party, so people were making bawdy, violent, very like sexual, violent movies. And
Right.
then
It was the Wild Wild West of filmmaking.
the Hays Code happens, and directors had to get what? They had to get really creative with how they handled it. But then late 60s, the studio system loses its theaters. International films are pouring in. You start getting, Americans are making Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, like the
Right,
doors
but
open
don't
to,
forget the threat of television.
yeah,
And what it did to the system. So they had to figure this out. They had to.
and exploitation cinema helped drive-ins,
Oh, for
grindhouse
sure.
cinemas
Yeah,
uh,
Grindhouse,
uh,
Grindhouse.
stay alive. There's just
Mhm.
like Roger Corman and his B features, like A/B movies that drive-throughs and just churning out these films. But
Right.
along the way, with all these there's Nazi exploitation films, there's black exploitation films,
Yeah.
there was
But
monsters.
right, Monster Ones, and then remember Rodriguez and Tarantino took a stab at it with that Planet Horror and Death Proof.
Yeah, you can't make a grindhouse film on a budget with a budget. I like those movies,
Hmm.
but they had too much support.
Oh yeah, they did. Yeah, right.
That's why exploitation movies can't be remade. So you watch I Spit on Your Grave or The Day of the Woman. They had no money. They shot this in like 35 days with an inexperienced director, a crew. They were all in their young 20s. Like nobody really knew what they were doing.
All novice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a
yeah.
question, Hakeem. I feel like it's the novices who create movies like this.
Yeah, because if you go back, I mean, you don't even have to go that far back from where we are now, but there was an era where the slasher films came out, like the Friday the 13th, or even the Halloween, where you had these directors that just said, "Hey, let's just do it. That's a good idea. Let's just do it. How much is it going to cost? I don't know. Let's just get some money together and let's do it." And these are the films that, they've stood the test of time.
Hmm.
Like we're talking about right now, I Spit on Your Grave, 78. How many years ago is that? That's like you're
Yeah.
talking about over 40, like 40 years. And these films are still being talked about because, I think the novice, they're coming from the heart. They're coming from, hey, let's just do it. It feels good. I know this is not a big Hollywood film, but it's going to say something. It's going to mean something to somebody. They probably didn't know how long this was going to, they'll probably watch it a couple of years or, it'll be banned in some countries and, at least we got it done. So that's the main thing, being able to complete the job.
And
You
also
know.
too, like, I Spit on Your Grave wasn't made by a Corman. It wasn't made by a studio system looking to churn out movies. Like, this wasn't a corporate schlock fest. You have 3 weeks to make a monster movie. This was a independent crew who was working outside the system. And then they somehow churned out this movie that, Ebert and Siskel hated. I mean, they despised it. It was banned in England. There was actually a court case where a kid, attacked and raped 2 women, and he said that it was because of this film. It was labeled video nasty in England. You couldn't even buy it in Ireland at the time. I mean, this movie actually faded when it was first out because it was Day of the Woman. And then what? I got his name right here. Jerry Gross gets a hold of it, changes to I Spit on Your Grave, adds a provocative post, releases it, and it's just like a grind. It was, did you read about how successful this was on video?
No, I did not.
So it like never hit #1, but it was on the video charts for so long, the VHS charts for so long, that it was one of the most rented movies of like the 80s when it came out.
I believe it. Because I remember seeing it on VHS in the 80s, and it was one of them films where you're watching it and you can't really believe what you're watching. Like, and I just recently watched it, and I think one of the most horrific scenes in the film, I still got chills from it. As dated as it is, special effects or whatever effects that, they have practical effects used on set, it still hit hard for me. So like I said, back in the days, if you're talking about 80s and you're talking about VHS, there are not a lot of films that you can watch to give you what I Spit on Your Grave gave you. Yeah, and because it was nonstop. After the first incident, it didn't let up. For the 85 minutes, I believe, or 80 minutes of the length of the film, it doesn't let up. After I say about 20 minutes, it doesn't let up.
And it takes zero time establishing what's going on. You have the main character played by Jennifer Hill's Camille Keaton, who married the director of this film, which I love, Meir Zarchi. And it's just, she drives out there. I mean, it's so exploitative though. Like, there's so much like male gaze, because as soon as she gets there, she takes off her clothes and jumps in the water. And you're like, what? Like, I guess you just got to remember, this is an exploitation movie. And then sooner than you know it, you have just a gigantic 3 rape scenes that take up over a half hour of the film. And you don't get much of the aftermath. Then you just get her hunting and killing the 4 men, brutally murdering them. And it's interesting too. I don't think in the history of this podcast I've read a more split take on this film. Like, you have the group who hate it. I understand why people hate it. You absolutely have the male gaze. You absolutely, like, this is a rape revenge film, and this is an entire subgenre. But yeah, that's why I think it's so divisive, right? You get people who, I mean, this is probably the first movie where, and normally in movies, it's the wife or the woman who gets fridged, and the dude has to go on a mission to avenge her. So in this one, it's the woman who is attacked, and she goes on the offensive and kills the men. And I was reading a really interesting article from The Guardian where the writer, she remembers picketing this movie when it came out. It was in England. She remembers picketing it and like hating the movie. But then she watched that movie The Accused with Jodie Foster, which was really popular, made a ton of money, was nominated for awards.
Exactly.
But what she said was she doesn't like either film, but she prefers I Spit on Your Grave because she said it doesn't have the illusion that like the law enforcement will help women who are attacked. Because in The Accused, the men who saw Jodie Foster being raped in the bar, they all are arrested and they are put on trial and found guilty. But there was actually a real trial where men who watched were acquitted. Like, they dropped the charges on them. So she said that The Accused is a fairy tale where it pretends like police and the law care for women, and she hates that movie. But she said I Spit on Your Grave doesn't even try to go to law enforcement. If this woman went to these law enforcement guy, the cops in this town, they would ignore her. So instead she murders them, like the guys. So she says she prefers the rape revenge angle of I Spit on Your Grave than it being a fairy tale where people actually like where the law pretends to care about women. So I I just really wanted to explore this movie because it's hard to talk about it as like in 2022 as a dude talking about I Spit on Your Grave and like the feminist aspects of it. So I was trying to research as much as possible. But the one thing I do admire about this movie is 44 years later, it is, 44? Yeah, 44 years later,
44
people are
years,
still talking about it. It's still brought up. It's still relevant, I guess, in the dialogue of exploitation films. And I think that's exactly what you said earlier, where it sort of happened organically by the directors and they knew they were making an exploitation movie, but I feel like they were trying to do something different. And that's why it works. And that was a very long answer, but I just think this movie brings out a lot.
Listen, the director had he was inspired, right? So he had a message, regardless to how gritty the film is content-wise, right? And if you watch it now, it's a little cleaner than what I remember watching it on VHS or on film, where it felt really gritty. I watched it just recently, and I'm like, yeah, this is good, and the photography is not really bad. It's not a bad looking movie, but the subject matter, the content is really rough. But in essence, or just in retrospect to what you said about it not being a movie for women, maybe it is, because the Jodie Foster film, The Accused, being, what did the woman say?
She said it was a fairy tale.
It's a fairy tale. Well, I Spit on Your Grave might be to this woman or to this critic a fantasy of what I would like to do to men that actually do this to women. Yeah. That gang rape or the rape culture. What are we going to do about it? And who better to solve the problem but the ones being exploited, right? The female being able to come back and get the men that actually violated them, and in a horrific manner.
It doesn't treat anything lightly, the movie, which I guess I do like, because I don't like it when movies trivialize things, or they, like the idea of a I Spit on Your Grave remake, which they made, just kind of makes me sick to my stomach. It really does, because it's glossy. Like, there's no point. It's not exploitation. It's not meant to shock. It's not meant to elicit polarizing reviews. They're just like, yeah, let's remake one of the most polarizing movies of all time with 80 times the budget and HD cameras. Like, it's that I'm more disgusted by the remake than the actual first film, because I just don't think you should recapture that. And I don't think these movies, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know how gross that movie is looking? It's like, and then when they remade it, it just felt like, why am I watching this now? I guess is what I'm asking. So with this movie, at least it made people either love it or hate it. And
right, it was one or the other. Correct.
I guess that's good sometimes for art, because if it's just a homogenous, like watered down movie that just features gratuitous violence and nudity, then that has nothing. You're not feeling a message. You're not feeling anger. You're not feeling anything. You're just watching it. So I guess I do admire the movie for that, because there's not many movies, Haikim, that have gotten this reaction widespread around the world than I Spit on Your Grave.
It's a handful. I would say maybe a dozen films that fit within this. Out of the, I don't know, countless number of films, I Spit on Your Grave is in a unique category. And it's not, the uniqueness of it, the authenticity of the film. And then when you try to remake something that was of shock, it was shock and awe for the cinema community. Like, and now when you remake it, it becomes, it's a copy. It's a bad copy. Mm-hmm. No matter how much money they throw at it or new directors they throw at it, it's not going to give you what this film, the original, the 78, gave you. In no way, shape, or form. It doesn't even come close to it, because the authenticity comes with not only the the raw talent that's involved, right? From the director to the DP to even the actors. Now these remakes, you throw in, just like you said, high definition, or these very expensive cameras, actors we've seen before, just a different. And most actors back from in the 70s came from stage. They're a different type of actor in comparison to film actors, right? So it's just a different instrument entirely from 78 to the remakes. And that just goes along with a lot of these films, just like you said. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a number of films that you just should not remake.
No, Last House on the Left, that
Another
movie, the way Wes Craven shot that film, I feel like he should have been arrested because that's oh man, any like based on what Virgin Springs, like the movies in the set. You know what's interesting? The American films of the 70s really hit me in the gut. They hit me in the gut like the French like hardcore films do, like like Inside, Martyrs, even recently with Raw and Titan. Like I feel like the French hit hard and the South Koreans hit hard. Like they go hard. So but they found a way to like the French and South Koreans have found a way to really transport hard hitting like hellish films into the 21st century. But like with American filmmaking in the 70s, when exploitation was hitting and this the Hays Code had dropped and there were grindhouse theaters and theaters, like it was more the Vietnam era made people more jaded. That's when like I feel like some of the angriest movies came out, the meanest movies. And it's kind of interesting watching. I feel like the 70s in the United States, at least for me, produced some of the best horror films. Jaws, Exorcist,
yes.
The Hills,
Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I mean, just the this pinnacle of horror, I think, was in the 70s. But yeah, this movie, I think, Ebert hates this movie. And I found some quotes from Ebert where he said, "The horrible events are shown with an absolute minimum of dialogue, which is so poorly recorded that it can not often be heard. There's no attempt to develop the personalities of the characters. They are simply a girl and four men, one of them mentally retarded. The movie is nothing more or less than a series of attacks on the girl and then her attacks on the men." And then he put, "This movie is an expression of the most diseased and perverted, darker human natures. It is made artlessly and it flaunts its motives. There's no reason to see this movie except to be entertained by the sight of sadism and suffering."
Well, to be entertained, right?
Yeah.
Well, do you think he's being harsh?
Oh, he's hard on horror movies.
Yeah, okay.
I read and I read a lot of Ebert, and he hates horror movies. So there's very few horror movies that he likes.
So he has a prejudice. From the offset.
Yeah. And he admitted to going hard on it later on in life. But I think it's him and Siskel who spread the word of this movie. Because, Haikim, you and I are 15, right? And we hear these guys saying it's the most depraved movie on the planet.
Oh, I'm going to see it.
Yeah, we go to the video store, you and I see it, and we're like, we're watching this, right?
Right,
of course. I think they helped spread the lore of the movie. I think they probably did more publicity for it than anything else probably could have because of the reputation for it. So it's and also too, like he says that it's made artlessly, but while watching, the production design, there's so much red in her cabin.
Yes. The scene where she's crawling on the ground, the cut to where she's crawling on the ground before she goes to the phone. Right before the second rape or the third rape? The third rape. Yeah. The third. Right before the third one, and she's on the floor crawling in the blood. I think that was very artistic. I think that was very, it fit the narrative, and basically getting into the second half of the second act. I think it was brilliant, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they have red carpets, red lamps, the red kayak, the red bathing suit. They did have a plan, like in regards to the production design, and there were some neat wide shots. Like there's a shot on the moment on the boat when the camera's in between the guy's legs. There are several wide shots that I think are very effective. I did laugh though because when she steps out of her house to look outside, and there's a light on the hammock, and then there's a light on the tree, and I'm just wondering where is this light coming from? It's a very I love the idea of the shot, but it just makes me laugh. But no, several of the wide shots I liked. There's the shot where she is laying on the rock for 30 seconds, just laying there. I think there was an attempt to. I mean, also, too, this had no budget, and film is expensive. And every frame of film you have to pay to get developed. And then you have to
Right.
pay to edit. So
You have to pay it. You
there's
got to put money into it after you already put money into it. Right. Exactly.
exactly like you're not going to get much coverage on a movie like I Spit on Your Grave. So they needed to rely on wide shots to tell a lot of the story. So I mean, I think for what it is and for the way they shot it and the budget, I don't think it's a badly filmed movie. I think there are some effective shots. It's bare bones, but I think that's smart. The directors knew they had no money, so they just shot it bare bones because they knew what was important for
Right.
the
Yep.
movie. And
Right. But it went down to basically the story. It
yeah,
was the story. Yeah, that was the most important thing.
and that's a shrewd choice because sometimes you see films that have $7 million budgets, but they try to make themselves like they're a $40 million film, and you can feel that stretch. You can feel that. So there's no bells and whistles. It's only meat and potatoes on this movie, but that's all it needed to be because of the subject matter. And also too, I mean, when she decides to kill Johnny and she just stabs him right in his genitals and leaves him bleeding to death in the
Right.
bathroom, and then she goes
Uh-huh.
downstairs and listens to the record.
Right. Right.
That's there's that is I'm not I guess it is an artistic decision. That's not just some people making a decision. They let you hear it. You hear him suffering. Like they want you to feel that.
Right. If you so from what I'm taking, like what you're talking about right now, I watched the film and there are moments for the character to reflect. Right. It wasn't and it was meat and potatoes, but it just wasn't okay, they rape her, she kills them, end the film. It was still some exposition in there that sent a message to the viewer, that sent a message to the I would say the rape community or rape culture and to women, to why would this happen? What part did you play? What part did they play? How am I to feel about this after I commit this crime? Because now we're talking about two crimes. We're talking about rape and we're talking about revenge and murder,
Hmm.
right? So they did take time. I don't feel, for me, watching the film, and it's a, 70s, late 70s, where there were a lot of films that came out late 70s, Friday the 13th, Halloween, a lot of horror films that came out where they didn't really have a big budget, and they did what they needed to for the story. Okay, we got this story. How are we going to shoot it, and how are we going to put the audience into the story? How do we engage them into the story? And I talked about the ones I just mentioned, Friday the 13th and Halloween, that were very big commercial successes in comparison to I Spit on Your Grave. And I Spit on Your Grave has more substance to it. It's more relatable. It's something that we can relate to, Michael Myers or Jason or someone coming back, but this woman, this Jennifer Hill, which was the character's name, where she goes on this Charles Bronson revenge. The cops are not even mentioned
No.
in the film. So this is why I said, like Wild West, this was her and them.
I mean, Meir Zarchi knew that cops wouldn't do anything. The director, he saw it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I like that they leave them out of this. Like I like that she immediately, well, not immediately, but several weeks goes by, and then she goes on the offensive. And I guess one thing too is these men are dumb. These four men are dumb. They are entitled. They are chauvinistic. I mean, even when they're dying, they are calling her, like they're calling her a bitch. They're calling her a slut. When they left her for dead, and she comes after them for revenge, they are insulting her. And I think that is the entitlement of so many men. This is something that's still going on today. But watching these men say that after the attack that they did, it's true. Like they are, like what the guy say? Like, oh, you're showing us your legs. Like, but that's been said a million times by other men. So like you said, there is more substance to it.
Because there are not a lot of movies that came out before this where the woman is the hero.
No, there wasn't really.
Yeah.
And even if the woman was the hero, like a Halloween, she's in retreat mode the entire time. She is being chased by Michael, and she is actually, Loomis comes in and shoots him and saves her. In this one, she hangs a dude, and then she cuts a guy's balls open, and then she axes a guy in the back, and then she disembowels a guy with a boat engine, kind of playing on them circling her before playing with the boat.
Right, before killing them. Correct. Correct.
And it's kind of nice that there's no cops involved. There's no Donald Pleasance. There's no Bronson. There's no Liam Neeson.
She was all of them combined.
Yeah, there's no Ryan Reynolds. There's no, like, I just keep thinking about fridging and how, like, it's always a catalyst for revenge. So yeah, I think this was probably one of the first. I mean, Miss 45 came after this. The Accused came after this. But you know what I do like? I don't know if you've watched it, but Neon released a movie called Revenge, and it's a rape revenge film, French film, but it was directed by a woman. So it has an entirely different gaze to it, but it's one of the most wildly bloody things you'll ever see in your life. So, like, it's a genre that's still around, and it's still happening, the rape revenge genre. So I mean, this movie did kick off an idea, I think. Does that make sense?
No, definitely.
Yeah.
So did you see the list in the documentary of the most
the 10 most violent movies?
Yeah, 300 was on there. What was the other film? And you had just
Clockwork Orange was on there.
Clockwork Orange was toward the bottom of the list.
Oh, would they have Passion of the Christ.
Passion of the Christ. There's another film that I'm thinking about. What was it? What else was
they
on
had
it?
Kill Bill, Wild Bunch.
Yep.
Wild Bunch. Hostel. Yeah, so this is it. Passion of the Christ, 300, Cannibal Holocaust, Kill Bill, Wild Bunch, I Spit on Your Grave, Hostel, Battle Royale, A Clockwork Orange, and High Tension.
High Tension.
Oh, French film. Alejandro Aja. He's amazing.
Yes.
He did Crawl.
Yes, that film. Now that film doesn't fit into this theme, but that's a unique one, horrifically. And with what we're talking about, and it's a woman that this movie is portrayed off of, correct?
Of this film itself, I Spit on Your Grave.
No. The High Tension film.
Yeah, she's the main character, and then she has she thinks someone's stalking her, but it's her. I know it's a spoiler, but whatever. Yeah. But like, if you think about these movies, I think The Passion of the Christ inspired immense conversations, right, about violence and that, and they used the violence to hit hard. 300. I was teaching high school. I used to teach AP English, Haikim, and I'll always remember it. The Monday after 300 came out, a couple of my students came into class and they're like, "That was the greatest movie I have ever seen in my life." Where the violence is stylistic, though. The violence, it's not revenge. It's just gratuitous slaughtering of. You know what's kind of crazy? This is Xerxes' army. These warriors are his, essentially, slaves. So they're just murdering this giant army, like Cannibal Holocaust, like the animal death and the, I don't know, but Kill Bill, right?
I've seen Cannibal Holocaust in the movies, but go ahead.
Did you tell me about it? Tell me about it.
Oh. I seen it when, and I'm telling my age, but I saw it when I was in high school. Okay? So when I was in high school, we would have these tests and we would get out early. And so me and my friends would go to Times Square, 42nd Street, and we would go to gritty movie theaters on 42nd Street, and they would be playing 3 films back to back. And that Cannibal Holocaust was one. And I felt like it was real. I was younger then, so, but it's a gross film. gross film. That's all I'll say about it. That should probably be on the top of the list if anybody has seen it. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I think of all the conversations that have happened from these 10. I mean, Wild Bunch is just violent. It's just wild violence.
Yeah.
Battle Royale's wild violence. I think. What do you think? Like, the most important conversations have probably come from A Clockwork Orange, I Spit on Your Grave, and Passion of the Christ.
You said I Spit on Your Grave, Passion of Christ, and what's the other one?
A Clockwork Orange.
See, A Clockwork Orange was a film that my mom actually had to, I believe, read the book and watch the movie. And she was in medical classes. and that was actually part of the curriculum.
What?
Clockwork Orange was, yeah. So it was because of the rape scene, it was because of the violence, and that's all within the first act.
The
Because
ultra
with
violence.
Clockwork Orange, right? It was a Kubrick did a fantastic job with that film psychologically, right? So when you mention the other films, I don't think it was more a psychological directive as Clockwork Orange was.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true. Because
yeah,
you have a wildly violent man who is down for some ultra violence, who becomes reformed, and and like has a kind of a happy ending, and which is a joke upon that violence culture itself, about how a man can go and do that and just be reformed. But yeah, I don't know. I guess from what I've read online, it just seems like I spit on your grave. I mean, I guess like that's the most battle royale. It's just violent. It's children
yeah,
murdering each other.
right, yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, spit on your grave really is so polarizing, which I would assume Passion of the Christ is as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. For many other reasons, political, religious, it hits hard. Passion of Christ hits hard, and it hits hard in so many different arenas. I Spit on Your Grave is kind of like, to me, it's direct. It's not going left. It's not going right. This is what the film is about. It's not about anything else other than the exploitation of women and revenge. That's what it is. The other films, Passion of Christ, that's why, I mean, they spoke so highly and poorly about that film in the same breath. Passion of Christ. I mean, similar to I Spit on Your Grave, love it or hate it.
can I ask you a question? So I was watching a TV show. It was a syndicated TV show about cheeky spies. And one of the computer guy of the group had a girlfriend who turned out to be a double agent with spying on them. These two had a relationship for probably 6 months. He probably loved her, but he found out she was double crossing him. There's a scene where he walks up to her, kills her in this TV show, kills a woman, and then a minute later he's drinking drinks and laughing about it. Like that to me, that violence is reprehensible because Americans at home watching that see that violence and see how casually it's treated. That's what I think is the most irresponsible violence. But I think in movies like I Saw the Devil or Thirst or Clockwork Orange or I Spit on Your Grave,
Uh-huh.
it takes the violence seriously.
Okay. Okay. All right. I hear what you're
And
saying. Yeah.
so I understand why a lot of people hate I Spit on Your Grave, but I do think it doesn't flinch or it doesn't make violence cute. It doesn't. I know she kills the men, but it's all ugly and it's nasty and it's revenge and it's a broken person. But in some of these TV shows, you just watch people get murdered and then no one cares, which to me is like that violence bothers me more because it's just you're killing a woman you used to date because she was a double agent and then you're drinking whiskey and joking about it.
Right.
Like that's not real. That's the accused level. That's a fairy
Right.
tale. Um,
It's not motivated,
no.
right?
Yeah.
There's no motivation. So you talked about Battle Royale, which is really the Squid Game. Same thing. No, right? No motivation for the killing. I mean, they explain it and justify it as part of the narrative, but like I said, who can relate to it? Who can relate to Squid Games? Entertaining. Battle Royale, entertaining, but who can relate to being in high school and now all of a sudden you got to kill your friends to survive? So the motivation for I Spit on Your Grave, it's we understand it. We don't have to think as hard or try to understand because we understand and know why she's doing it, and we know why they were doing it. As you said, stupid. Country. I
Yeah.
almost think about Deliverance.
Yeah.
Like you got these backwoods. In the woods. This is how we live. This is what we do. We don't. There are no cops involved. We do whatever we want to do, and we deal with the consequences as they come.
And then they
So,
get bow and arrowed by Burt Reynolds. That's a revenge. That's like a rape revenge
oh yeah, that's
movie.
definitely a rape revenge film.
Uh,
Yes, for sure.
and this is really random, but I wanted to see what you thought about this. So I can tell that Jordan Peele is an excellent student of the horror genre
Uh-huh.
because when you watch Get Out, he's taken to the middle of nowhere. He is double crossed. They take him, they pin him down. They're going to take his soul, take his body and, get rid of it. They're going to get rid of him. and he goes on a revenge mission
Right.
where the audience clapped, and I think everyone found catharsis in him murdering the family. I remember sitting in the theater and hearing people clap. So it's really like I think Jordan Peele, like, you know, he combined Rosemary's Baby, he loves the Twilight Zone, but he found a way to take the revenge narrative and have people find catharsis in it. Like, I'm not saying it's a rape revenge movie, but I just think it is a revenge film, and he found a way to like take that into the mainstream and find like catharsis for audiences and cheering and clapping with that. And that's why I think Get Out is so good, because
Oh yeah, it's excellent.
he
Excellent.
I just think he understands the genre and knew
Hmm.
exactly what he was doing. But I think I don't know what you think about that.
You know, having the audience so engaged and the pathos involved, you
Mhm.
know, understanding on how the emotion and the passion, because you have to engage your audience. Your story has to be able to connect, you know, and I think Peele is good at it. And we talk about, if you talked about his newer films like Us or Nope, and how they're totally different from Get Out.
Yeah.
You know, they just have a different sweep for me with the films. But still, going back to I Spit on Your Grave is really knowing the audience, right? Knowing your audience, knowing what you're trying to say. And I think that Meir's, he knew. I mean, even though he had experience, or Meir, he had experience, you know, the woman in the woods coming out and him protecting her, saving her. He had said in a documentary, like when they brought this woman into the car naked, she was sitting right next to his 8-year-old daughter. So his daughter had to experience what they're experiencing, and she had to take that in. She had said she didn't even know what rape was, what she did after. So you know, so for me, it's still knowing your audience, knowing what you're trying to say, what's your message. That's the ultimate thing: is you have a story, and what's your message. So Siskel and Ebert could beat I Spit on Your Grave up and a lot of the exploitation films from back in the 70s. But if you think about cinema today, there's a connection between 70s cinema and now, and they can't duplicate it. There's no there is not the originality that they had out then now, and I kind of understand it, because just as you said, they have so many resources now. It becomes a, you know, option. What's that? Paralysis, to where you can't make choices. You have so many choices now. You paralysis where you don't know what to do. Back then they didn't have all the choices. We
Mhm.
have film. We have limited film. We got to make sure this scene, it has to work. You know, if it doesn't work, what are we going to do now? Is, you know, shooting digital or shooting on even film, but just shooting digital now. It's like, all right, we don't get it now. We'll get it. We'll eventually get it. You know, that pressure is not on them the way they had pressure back then. You know, I feel lower budgets, original content, you know, because they keep remaking these films with different names. The Accused, you know, with different names. They just remaking. And Miss 45, didn't Jodie Foster do a remake of Miss 45 called The Right One?
Oh, this was the Brave one.
Brave One.
And
Yes, the Brave One. There we go.
you know what's crazy too is this could be a great campaign to study as far as the marketing. But this movie, The
Mm-hmm.
Day of the Woman, comes out, kind of a not the best poster. It tanks. It disappears.
And you said that was a Demi Moore in the new
Yeah,
poster?
so in the new and with the one that they did when they switched it to I Spit on Your Grave, they put Demi Moore on the poster, according to the documentary, and in her book she said that. You switch the poster, you put a very provocative poster on there. You have a marketing campaign that puts the focus on the horror. So this went from being a exploitation sort of revenge film thriller. Like, the director doesn't think this movie is a horror film. He specifically says that it's not a horror movie. He actually says that this is a biblical story, eye for an eye, that he's talking about. But then they started
Okay.
marketing it as a horror film, and that's when it took off. And a lot of the cast and crew at the end of the documentary aren't happy about that. The actors, they're saying, yeah, it's fine. It brought more eyes onto the film, but it also brought in a completely different fan base who supported it for reasons that we never really intended, but people rallied around it. So I thought that was really interesting in a case of marketing, how you make a new poster, you change the title, you make a provocative trailer, and then the movie becomes the most rented film of the year, because it never hits number one, but it's always there. So I just found that to be really interesting and kind of a nice it's just a good example of marketing, I guess. So I kind of liked
I
that.
think it goes beyond marketing because it's the power of cinema. We're going to interpret what we want to interpret from the film, right? So we couldn't make Bambi a horror film. It's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So even though it was a biblical, as he said, an eye for an eye, it borderlined the elements of horror. It borderlined what people are horrified or terrified of. I still feel like I Spit on Your Grave. The horror elements are there.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they're there. They're there in this, and then it twist. I think the good thing about I Spit on Your Grave was it was horrific to see what these men did to her, but what she did to them was justified and just as bad. The hanging, the mutilation, the what's that? Jana Bobbitt. She Jana Bobbitt
Yeah,
him,
yeah. Yeah,
you
Lorena
know. So,
Bobbitt.
Serena Bobbitt, yes, I'm
Yeah.
sure she saw I Spit on Your Grave. I can almost guarantee she saw this film and was inspired by this film to do what she did. So I think this film did a lot for, I would say. I mean, because still, is there another film? And just aside from the remakes, is there another film that we can compare to this film?
Well, I mean, I guess if I had to put a double feature together, I'd put this and Last House on the Left, even though it's the
Okay.
parents who get their revenge in Last House on the
Mm-hmm.
Left, but
Uh-huh.
just the way they're filmed,
Okay.
the way that they just embrace gritty, gross mud.
Mhm.
Like in this scene, these people are laying in mud. Like the attacks, they are on location. The mud that is on them is not fake. This is not fake mud. Like sometimes in movies there's fake mud. They were in the woods. They were, I mean, gross, sweaty, and so I think both films, I think I would do that. But that's what I would say because they're both not overly stylized. They're very flat looking, which was a decision, a smart decision.
Right.
But yeah, I would put those two together if I
I
had
don't.
to.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a film like I think about Death Wish, that was a revenge film, but I don't know if I could put because Charles Bronson was in it, so it was
Yeah.
definitely a step up. I Spit on Your Grave was gritty, independent. I mean, so there were some films that we can talk about, like I talked about Friday the 13th or Halloween or even Nightmare on Elm Street, right? These independent films that did very well, right? But I Spit on Your Grave was a totally different independent vehicle. And for what it did for cinema, because my take on films are what they did for the time, not how successful they were, because you have films that are really not that successful, but then VHS, DVD sales put them in a place where you're like, wow. The Thing is another good example.
Oh,
Didn't
yeah.
do that well at the theaters, but it's a cult classic. Everybody watches The Thing. Everybody has seen, especially if you're a filmmaker or a film buff. That's a film that's automatic, right?
It's an all
So,
timer.
yeah, yeah. So there are some films that for the time period it's unmatched, and I feel like I Spit on Your Grave is one of them. That was one of the films where VHS. I remember we were one of the first families on the block that had a VHS, and I Spit on Your Grave was one of the first films we had and we watched. Was I Spit on Your Grave? It was Bad Boy with Sean Penn. Oh, what was the other one? It was another film, but these were gritty independent films. When you went to Blockbuster or wherever you went, that was the VHS tape you got. And if they didn't have it, it'll be back in the day. I'll be back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be back for it. So yeah, I Spit on Your Grave was a good choice.
And it's kind of interesting. Before we get out here, real quick, I just think Friday the 13th it started off as a revenge film. Nightmare on Elm Street was a revenge film. It was Freddy Krueger getting revenge on the people who killed him. Halloween wasn't. Black Christmas
No,
was not.
actually, wait a minute. No, Halloween was a revenge film. Michael Myers was trying to get his sister, the revenge, the sibling.
Yeah, but in the first one, they weren't related yet. That didn't come along till the second one. So the first one, Carpenter said he just saw them when he yelled at them, and then he decides to stalk them.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
But
Okay.
it's interesting how the revenge angle is really prevalent with horror villains as well. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer. That's a
Right.
revenge film.
Uh-huh.
It's like an opposite revenge film. So I mean, this movie I think did help revenge films sort of go a different route. As opposed to the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre when Sally's screaming away from Leatherface and is going to be mentally destroyed for the rest of her life. You get the character in I Spit in Your Grave going back and killing Leatherface.
Right.
I think the success, the later on success, definitely influenced a lot, for sure. Yeah, no, this is good, but I appreciate you joining me. I look forward to our next Maniac, 1980s Maniac.
This is the doozy. This is a doozy. This one right, this one right here. And in closing, back then in the 70s, the effects that they used were so, the plastics or the prosthetics and the things used were so cheesy. They didn't look as real as the special effects that are used now. But the substance isn't there. And Maniac, it's a dark film. So I can't wait, because I Spit on Your Grave, to sit there and think about it, I Spit on Your Grave was all in daylight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is a good contrast, because I think Maniac is all evening. Everything is done evening. I mean, all of the killing is done in the evening. So
I guess it is a daytime movie, I Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah, it's a daytime. I don't think there's any. I mean, they didn't have to really be too concerned with lights other than the interior shots, but the exterior shots, and they shot on film on a dock. In the documentary, they're on a dock, shooting the boat scene, and she talked about getting close to them. So I think, that independent, that grittiness is, you can see it on screen with the final product, not polished, put together to tell the story and the essence of cinema. And that's a lot of the overseas productions, bare bone.
I mean, Jaws. They're hunting a shark. Rosemary's Baby, Evil Kid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Exorcist.
Yeah. Possessed Kid.
Possessed Kid. What are we gonna do?
Linda Blair. Yeah. That's insane. All right. Well, hey. Well, I look forward to Maniac, and I really appreciate you joining me here. Do you have anything to plug? Do you want to have people watch your short films? What do you got?
Yeah. Hey, I got I guess this isn't the horror genre, but it's a thriller action. Film called Maternal that I produced, and good friend of mine, Vanden Gibbs, directed. It's doing the festival circuit right now. It's a really good film. If y'all get a chance, research it. Maternal. You go to IMDb and see if you can, when it's in your city, definitely check it out. I have a couple of films, a short film and a feature film that I'm kind of in pre-pro right now. Hopefully get it off the ground with some financing. That's always the struggle, is finding. But you know what, to say that these independent films that we're watching, talking about these exploitation films, they didn't have a lot of money, and they made it. They made it happen. They made it work. And if you talk about $1 million back then for making a movie, you're talking about maybe $100,000 for the same now. It's not. The way you spend money for a production is totally different, right now. So, yeah, so that's what I'm kind of working on. Everybody get a chance. Haikim Robinson, check me out.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me. Awesome. So for me, Mark Hoffmeyer, and for Haikim Robinson, this is Movies on the Flicks. We'll see you next week.